Pretty soon we're going to have molecular manufacturing devices that can make anything. So once we have a huge amount of supply, then demand goes away. And then all of a sudden, if everybody has what they want, even the idea of greed, which is a terrible part of our emotional construct, that'll kind of become dormant. Like, what are we going to fight over? Why would a country want to fight? It's like, well, I'm going to fight because we want more of the resources. Well, what if we have molecular manufacturing devices and it makes everything we want all the time? What are you going to fight over?
Thank you, Charlie, for joining Change I Am Possible, which is India's first Futurist podcast. Pleasure and honor to have you. I'm going to give a small introduction about you to my audience who don't know about you. So, Mr. Charlie Cam is an entrepreneur, a transhumanist advocate. He is a member of the World Transhumanist Association, Immortalist Institute, World Future Society, Singularity University, and the Alcor Life Foundation. He was the founder of Greenpack Construction, which builds state-of-art solar-powered homes with sustainability at score value, and is currently running for president for the United States Transhumanist Party. Charlie, it's a pleasure and honor to have you on the show. So you are a transhumanism advocate. So would you like to talk about a little bit about that? What is transhumanism and what excited you to get into transhumanism?
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in a family that was very science oriented. We weren't particularly religious. We were much more about the Big Bang Theory and evolution, and here we are. So, early on in my life, when I was surrounded by other kids my age, they figured they'd die and go to heaven. In my family, and for me, it was like you die and you go away. It was no fun. It was not a very, very comforting thought. And it really started to generate my interest in what really is going on with life and how can we maybe not die. And the more I researched things, the more I saw that there was different kinds of technologies that were not far off. That drew me more and more to find out about these technologies and to find out like-minded people. So while I started finding out about books that were written by, for example, Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman is an amazing author who had written books long before I was born about, how we're going to essentially use nanotechnology to advance our world in amazing ways. Of course, later on, there were other writers like Werner Vinge and Eric Drexler came out with the book Engines of Creations in the 1980s that described nanotechnology. That was one of the earliest books I read. Ray Kurzweil, of course, came out with The Age of the Intelligent Machine, which was a book in 1990. Of course, followed up by probably his most famous book, which was The Age of the Spiritual Machine in the year 2000. So those kinds of books are what really got me into the idea of transhumanism, because where it was just like a thought when I was a young kid, all of a sudden I found out there were not just people that were interested in it, but brilliant people. And when you read these books, it's not just a description, but it's a comprehensive work of how it's going to happen, how we're going to get there, and it's very well thought out and laid out for the common man to read and to grasp. And as I read that book, I was anticipating his next book, which was coming out in 2005, called The Singularity is Near. As I was looking at all these things, I started to think, these are very important things that I would like to know more about, and as I said, find out more people that were into it. And I found out that there was something called the World Transhumanist Association, and that they had conferences all around the world every year. So I attended one in 2005 in Caracas, Venezuela. It was hosted by Jose Cordero. He's a transhumanist. He's in the Transhumanist World Association, and he also graduated from MIT. He's a brilliant, brilliant guy. And he's a big fan of Ray Kurzweil, as it turned out. So I went down there and I met him, and I met several other transhumanists that were pioneers in the transhumanist movement, like Max Moore and Natasha Vita Moore. And so when I saw that conference, and I thought, that's a pretty good conference, it would be great, though, if we could have a really big conference, because these are the kind of important ideas that the world needs to know about. And I contacted the World Transhumanist Association and said, I'd like to maybe host an event. Well, they said we have a couple of we already had they already had their event scheduled for Helsinki, Finland in 2006. They said, but 2007 is open. Well, in 2005, when I contacted him, that was the same year that the book Singularity is Near is coming out. It came out that year, and I really wanted that book, because I was already hooked on Ray Kurzweil, right? So I ordered the earliest edition I could get. I paid extra money just to get that. And when I got that book, I basically read it within one night. When you're passionate about something, you just can't stop. So I read the book. And when I read the book, and it's 600 pages, and I thought this really is the most profound book I ever read. Everybody needs to know about it. And yet a lot of people I know, they won't sit and read 600 pages. It's a lot to learn, and there's some technical stuff in there. But my background is I studied biochemistry, and I went to med school, and I studied, but I also have a background in music. And I thought, I think if I take all of Ray's important points in his book and turn it into a song, maybe more people will listen to that and get into it. So I wrote a song called I Am the Very Model of a Singularitarian, and it was based on an old Gilbert and Sullivan song. It had a lot of words in it, so I took those old words out, repurposed it for Ray's book, and anyway, I released it on the internet, and it found its way to a lot of the people that work for Ray and Ray Kurzweil, because he had a company called Kurzweil Technologies in Boston. In any case, it turns out because they're fans, I contacted Ray and his people, and I said, hey, would it be possible if I held a conference in Chicago, would Ray be my keynote speaker? Because I found out that the World Transhumanist Association, who had been around now for, I don't know, over 10 years by the time I, asked them if I could hold a conference, he'd never spoken there. And so when I asked Ray and the people that work for him, and I said, would he do it? They said, oh, Charlie Cam, yeah, we love your song. And I'm like, great. Will he do it? They go, yeah, because we love this song, he'll do it. I'm like, okay, great. So I contacted the World Transhumanist Association. I said, look, I want to do the conference. And by the way, I saw you guys never had Ray. I got Ray Kurzweil. Can I host the conference? They said, oh my God, yeah, of course. You got Ray, we're happy. So I hosted a 3-day conference in Chicago with the idea that if I get a lot of brilliant speakers in there, that I can help spread the word of transhumanism as much as possible. And so when I got Ray Kurzweil to agree, and I started contacting other important and high-level luminaries in the field of transhumanism, they all agreed too, because they were all fans of Ray's as well. So not only did I have Ray as my keynote speaker, but I also got Aubrey de Grey, who's a brilliant transhumanist, Martine Rothblatt, who started Sirius Satellite Radio, and she's an amazing transhumanist as well. There was just so many. Of course, Jose Cordero was there, and Natasha Vida Moore, and Max Moore, and Ben Goertzel, who he and David Hansen were both there, and they were the founders of Hansen Robotics, or David was, and they started the Sophia the Robot, which is now huge. And of course, I had Peter Diamandis was there. He's an amazing transhumanist who's started the X Prizes and zero gravity flight. So what happened was while I was trying to sell these tickets, even though I was a big fan of science and I'm a big nerd and I love science, I thought everybody was. Well, it turns out it's not so easy to sell tickets to just get people to show up for science. So I thought maybe if I get some famous celebrity, because, people just love celebrities. Right. So I thought I had to get the right one. And when I started thinking about it, I thought, of all the TV shows that are out there or movies or whatever, there was one where humanity not only didn't kill itself, but it went on to become amazing and grow into this fantastic society where it traveled and explored strange new worlds and seek out new civilizations. Well, of course, I'm talking about Star Trek. And the main guy of Star Trek, and when I was a little kid growing up watching even the reruns, was always Captain Kirk, who was William Shatner. Okay. So I contacted William Shatner's office. His agent said, hey, I said, look, I'm holding this big conference. I got a lot of celebrities. A lot of scientists. I'd love to have William Shatner come. And the agent says, look, he's not going to just come to a conference in Chicago somewhere. He's a busy guy. I said, yeah, we've got a lot of good speakers. One of our keynote speakers, their main guy is Ray Kurzweil. And the agent, wait, let me get back to you on that. And he got back to me the next day. He says, you know what, he'll do it. Shatner will come because he's a big fan of Ray. I was real happy about that. So it was good to see that the celebrities were fans. It wasn't just like scientists. Anyway, Shatner came, so we had William Shatner come. And then the event was a huge success. We had a lot of attendees there. It was the biggest conference that the World Transhumanist Association ever had at the point. And a lot of good stuff came from it, as it turned out, because that's where Martine Rothblatt, who I mentioned, met with David Hansen and created Bina 48, the world's first talking artificial robotic head, which is still going on, and they keep improving it. It's amazing. And on the third day, when we had the dinner for all the speakers, I was sitting right next to, of course, Ray Kurzweil sitting next to me. Well, right next to him was Peter Diamandis. Well, the two of them started talking about, hey, this kind of this kind of setting with all these things that we have here, this is the kind of thing we want to turn into a bigger academic setting. And from that,
Singularity University.
That's when they launched Singularity University a year later. And now Singularity Universities are starting to pop up all over the place. And Singularity University got a lot of money from the founders of Google. Which includes Sergey Brin and Larry Page. And Larry Page and Sergey Brin basically fell in love with Ray Kurzweil too, just like me. And then they asked him to become their engineering department head over at or one of their engineering heads at the Google itself. So Ray got started working there. So I'm sorry to go on and on, but I get excited about this subject matter. But it really is a big part of my life, in that my goal, my whole adult life and even before, was really to spread the idea of transhumanism, of singularitarianism, as Ray describes in his book, all of those ideas, because I think it's important that the world finds out about these things, because it's going to change everybody's life. And it's not just going to change lives. It's going to save lives. And people need to know about this stuff now, because people are dying, like from COVID, for example. I think if we would have implemented a lot of these ideas sooner, a lot of these people wouldn't be dying, or they wouldn't have to die. Or if they died, there might be other things we could do for them.
Right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead now.
No, lovely. I mean, it's nice to hear the story behind your conference and how Singularity University was incepted out of that conference. I mean, I don't know what's stopping you from the second edition. I mean, you should keep this like a yearly edition rather than you stopped at 2007, right? You didn't move on. So yes, I think transhumanism, I guess the world needs to know about it. The world needs to know about the importance of it. But yes, some of the ideas behind transhumanism is a little too scary for a common man. And I guess that's the reason. If you see, the net is full of negative stories, or the media is reporting only the negative side of transhumanism. It's most of the conspiracy theories which is being flooded. When you talk about transhumanism, do you think that there is some kind of misinformation, or maybe it's not rightly projected? Because if you go to see Yuval Noah Harari, he is saying the same thing, but he is using another term. He's saying that the word homo deus, that eventually when the man-machine convergence happen, humanity will evolve from being homo sapiens to homo deus. But and that largely somehow is accepted by the larger audience. But transhumanism, the word itself, people say, oh, I'm not going to put implants, I'm not going to get myself a body implant. But if you see throughout human history, we've been augmenting ourselves, right from a makeup to, for health reasons, we've been So can you tell me more about transhumanism, as in the sense, how close or far are we from human longevity, from age reversal, and things like that, which could be extremely transformational for mankind?
Oh, how far are we? Well, as I said, that Singularity by Ray is predicted in 2045, so that's 25 years away, but that's the singularity itself. As far as as far as the transhumanist, the ideas and the idea that it's not accepted, I think it's in part it's the word itself. It's not familiar with a lot of people. A lot of it is just not knowing. As you pointed out, when Elon Musk talks about it, it gets a lot more acceptance than if we just talk about it. And I think that goes back to even why I had to get William Shatner to come to my conference. The people. It's all about knowing about something, about being comfortable with it, about having it out there more in a positive way. I mean, most of the time when movies are fabricated and put together, they need to have a villain. And if you go back in the olden days, it might have been some other culture, an invasion of cowboys and Indians or whatever. And then later on it became space alien creatures that would come, or radiation that caused things to change. And now it's going to be about futuristic technologies. Schwarzenegger makes lots of movies where there's all sorts of damage and things, but that's part of Hollywood. They have to have conflict. And so the first introduction to a lot of these ideas might have a negative connotation. And that's unfortunate because you kind of unlearn that from society. But transhumanism is not like any other idea. It starts out where people don't understand it. And when people don't understand things, they tend to fear it. It's like anything else, right? You don't know it. They might think it's crazy, or they're not sure about it. And of course, if you're uncertain, no one likes to accept change so easily because they don't know it's called the fear of the unknown. That's been something that's been talked about by authors like Abraham Maslow and all sorts of people. But I think what's happening is when you have popular people in the culture like Elon Musk who start to really embrace the ideas of transhumanism, it's going to get more and more accepted. I mean, the fact that he wants to do a brain interface, right. There's a lot of controversy, but at the same time, I see a lot more people saying, hey, that's a good idea, because everybody wants to improve themselves. And people are looking for solutions. And the other thing about transhumanism is, as I've been finding out, when I first asked somebody, hey, are you a transhumanist? Well, number one, they don't know what they don't even know what it is. Number two, they say, or they might have the wrong idea of what it is. They think it's something that it's not. But if I describe the ideas within transhumanism, for example, if I say, look, what we're trying to do is use innovative, latest cutting technologies to extend lives. That's what we're all about, really. We want to use the latest technologies and put them at the forefront of society's discussions and media, social media, so that people pay more attention to the things that can save lives, and not just save lives, but extend them beyond the genetic disposition that they already hold. So, for example, I know that right now we calculated that according to our genes that a human can live at least 120 years maximally if we were really healthy and did a good, robust job of keeping ourselves intact and healthy. Well, we don't always achieve that. But with certain kinds of biotechnologies, we can improve our health span, not just our lifespan, but our health spans, so that we can live up to 120 years, but live very healthily, so that we, aren't old and decrepit and falling down by the time we're in our 90s, where we're fragile. We're talking about the types of innovative kinds of technologies that can make us like robust 20-year-old healthy people all the way through till 120. Now, that's our immediate goal for the transhumanists, is we want to make sure that people can live longer and healthier, and they can use regenerative medicine and all that stuff to make themselves better. A longer-term goal, of course, is to go beyond the except 120 years, and that is part of the same. It's the same trajectory in a way. Once you stay healthy and you can be, put it this way, if we can make people young and vibrant and healthy biologically, even if chronologically they might be 120 years old, but they're at their peak performance and they've got all their T cells working at top notch and they're 120 years old, well, there's no reason that they would die at 120. So they're going to keep going on. And that's a big part of it. And this is another reason why it's a little hard for people to accept transhumanism. When we start talking about living indefinitely, I mean, you shouldn't even say the word immortal, because that sounds scary. That means not dying. And truthfully, you can't say immortal if you use words like immortal, you're pre-predicting something about, well, you're never going to die. Well, we don't know you'll never die. I mean, a meteorite might, land and smash and kill us all or something terrible. So it could always happen. But for the most part, what we're talking about is keeping people alive, very healthy, very much improved in the way they live, and doing it for long, indefinite periods. That's our goal. So I understand why there's a certain trepidation about it, but I do think as we grow smaller, and by that I mean communication-wise, as we grow as a community globally, where we're all talking to each other and we're starting to express these ideas, even what you're doing today with this podcast, and thank you again, talking to everybody around the world is what makes it less and less strange or mysterious. Because transhumanism, when you think about it, not only is the term or what we're trying to do basically harmless, it's actually very helpful and could improve lives in a big way. That's why I try, and I spend so much time trying to spread the word. I've done a lot of music videos about the good side of transhumanism. I always try to put the important aspects of how we'll help each other. And there's all sorts of other aspects that we didn't touch on, but cryonics is a big part of it too. That's another thing that people don't know much about, but it's going to become very big in the near future as it gets more and more readily accepted.
Right. Yeah, so I guess you rightfully pointed out that the human race, we're largely reluctant towards change, and especially with anything new. And technology is something that we've always been very reluctant towards. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned how technology is growing exponentially, and it's going to a place where it's going to transform mankind. All of these technologies, right from your artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain, and all of these technologies, if you kind of dig deeper, you'll understand that these technologies are transformational. It's somehow the larger narrative towards these technologies. For example, blockchain. Blockchain could be a disruptive technology, but the media just takes one convenient part, like the cryptocurrency or the ICO scams, and paints a very negative picture about it. Like, for example, brain-computer interface. It needed somebody like an ambassador like Elon Musk to come and show the importance of a man-machine convergence, which in the near term, where machines would and might get intelligent, for us to stay relevant, the only way we could stay relevant is the convergence. But yes, I guess maybe with the transhumanist movement as such, there has been some misinterpretation, or maybe there was no one individual ambassador which could correctly point out towards the health benefits and of this transhumanism movement, how it could save lives. I was having a conversation with Dr. Harold Katcher, and he is the CTO of Nugenics, and they're working on human longevity and reversal of aging, and they're using this young blood plasma transfusion, which is shown to prove somewhere around 54% of age reversal. So yes, I think these technologies can be transformational, but there are these human barriers we have, with religion, these blinders we have, or politics. You talk to someone and you tell them that there is this technology which could make you live longer and healthier, maybe cross 100 and 200 or whatever, and suddenly you have this picture of God in front of you, and they say you are playing God, and how can you do that? And I guess those barriers need to go off, because we're living in 2020 and the world is changing so dynamically that we need to take in all the goods and help society and mankind evolve. So I personally am super excited about anything and everything which will evolve mankind. So can you talk about United States Transhumanist Party, and you are the presidential candidate, right?
Yeah.
A little bit about that, and what is your agenda? Why politics?
Here's the thing. In the United States, we basically have a duopoly of two parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. And it's really hard to break into that and bring a third party into relevancy there. And we know that, and it's been the case for a long time, and it's unfortunate. Hopefully the United States will change that. We'd like to see a change where people have bigger selections of more options with more parties. But what we did notice was that even though those are the two main parties, what's happened, if you look at the last couple of elections, the two people that were the most popular in those two parties weren't really from those parties. Donald Trump, who's the current president, he was not really a Republican. He was a TV reality show host and a real estate developer, but he signed up as a Republican and went on stage and says, well, I'm going to do all these things, which he did not do, but whatever. And then in the Democratic Party, you had a lot of people running, and then Bernie Sanders, who was a Democratic socialist, essentially, he wasn't a registered Democrat. He was registered with the Independent Party, but he declared himself as a Democratic socialist. He switched to the Democratic Party, and he was really the most popular person in the Democratic field. I mean, he generated a lot of excitement. So what we saw was the fact is that and his ideas, by the way, became adopted by a lot of the Democrats. They moved a lot to the left, and so what we saw was that other parties or other people that weren't necessarily part of that party were able to get their ideas into those platforms of those parties. I mean, there's a political party called the Green Party, and they're all about stopping global climate change. And they became popular enough that it got addressed now by the Democrats in all the candidates' descriptions of what they stand for. So they had to listen to them finally because they grew in popularity. So what we're hoping to do with the Transhumanist Party, we know it's going to be impossible to win this time, but the goal really is about getting the word out there, explaining what we stand for, getting a lot of membership, and try to push the ideas so much so that it gets adopted by whomever the leaders are. They start to recognize our ideas because, like I said, our ideas are about saving humanity. So we're really just trying to push our movement as much as possible. And of course, we do hope that one day that the duopoly will start to change into multiple party choices for the general electorate. And when we do, if we've already have an established a political party, then we're ahead of the game. So that's what we're trying to do.
Right. So with this COVID thing, I mean, in America, I read somewhere that some close to around 50 million are jobless. In India, we have somewhere around 120 million who are jobless. The dynamics of the entire world has been impacted because of COVID. Economies are shattering. Acceleration of technology or Industry 4.0. There's going to be social distancing. Because of social distancing, there'll be automation. There'll be more job loss. So what I'm saying is there's some 50 million more jobs. Then now these technologies, which is accelerating, which will create further job loss. Are we as a society prepared for something like this? If you were to become the president of the country, what would you do to tackle this problem?
Sadly, it was really, really poorly mishandled by our current leader. I mean, this goes to a lot of what we're talking about today about education. He's just unqualified to be the president because his suggestions were nonsensical. With the idea of injecting disinfectant into a body to somehow do something to kill it was just silliness. But his inactivity early on, where he said it was just going to go away, was not just ridiculous, but it's fatal. So many more people died because he was delaying acknowledging that it was even here or it's coming, and he didn't prepare. He didn't start to get the masks that we needed, or the breathing devices, and all the different types of technologies and technical equipment that we needed to keep those people alive and to slow it down and to implement a national policy on wearing masks and particularly protecting the old people. All those things were right in front of us because it was already happening in Asia and in Italy. I mean, there was no reason that stuff shouldn't have been dealt with early on, except for the fact that we have a leader that is not only incompetent, but he doesn't have any kind of knowledge about science. And so when you're asking about what would the Transhumanist Party have done had we been in charge, well, obviously we would have implemented a lot of the things I just mentioned immediately, like early as possible, as soon as there was any detection. And what I, particularly if I was the person running, I mean, I am running, but if I was the one to be in the White House, I would surround myself with the greatest scientists that we could possibly find. Hopefully Ray Kurzweil, of course. But the point is, and something that did happen, as it became obvious to the American people that we had an incompetent president, whenever he started to come out and give briefings, he had some scientists in front of him, like Dr. Fauci. And after a while, when he would make such silly statements about things that he had no idea about, people started to realize that let's stop listening to him and wait for the next guy to come up to the podium, which was Dr. Fauci. And more people are saying, like, we don't want to hear from that crazy leader. We want to hear from the scientists. And that became really much more where everybody was focused on. Like, we need the answers from the people that know what they're doing, which are scientists, which, you know, beckons back to the party of the United States Transhumanist Party, because we're all about science. You know, we derive our policies and everything from the idea of empirical science and the latest technologies that are out there to help humanity. We're all about science, and we're all about what's the best thing to keep us healthy. And if I was the president, as I said, I would have tried to deal with all these things early on. But even before then, had we become the leaders, like in 2016, when we had our first candidate, Zoltan Istvan, running, had we been in power, we would have already reallocated the funding in the budget of our country so that we don't spend more than half of our entire budget on a military that's already has enough nuclear weaponry to blow up the world 40 times over. I mean, why do we keep spending so much money on the military when we have a health crisis in our country and that's growing all the time? So we would have already set up a situation where we could have allocated a lot more funding towards the innovations and the companies that are really coming out with the best ways to keep people alive. And by doing that, by being proactive, you would then be able to cut down the costs of the medical expenditures of our country. So now by redistributing things towards things in a proactive way, you affect the entire economy. And there's so many more things to go into, and I don't want to ramble on forever, but I think you kind of see where I'm going. And that gives you a little bit of what would be the difference between a transhumanist administration as opposed to the one we have now.
Right. So do you think the world is ready for a presidential candidate whose agenda is transhumanism?
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you why. And this is interesting. If you followed politics here and what happened in the last primaries for the Democratic side, because the Republicans, they already have Trump going to run again in 2020, but they had a fellow named Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang was basically a tech entrepreneur, and he was very science oriented, and he managed to get on the stage for the debates. And again, here's a guy who was not really a politician. He wasn't a Democratic politician, but he got on stage and he started to get a lot of popularity, especially amongst young college-educated people, because he was talking about universal basic income. Now, of course, that was something that a lot of people were skeptical about, because they said, well, we can't afford it. But he came up with a different economic idea about, like, no, we can if we would reallocate funding. And of course, he didn't win the nomination. He was on stage for a few debates, and he garnered some traction. But after a while, he resigned. You know, he stepped out of the campaign because he wasn't getting enough support, because the idea of UBI, universal basic income, wasn't quite acceptable in our capitalist economy of the United States. However, what happened since then, and a lot of people joke that maybe he dropped out a few months too soon, COVID came along. And all of a sudden, people are losing their jobs because of the social restrictions. to the point that we're losing millions and millions of jobs. People aren't having their income, and now we have to have emergency funding, which could be considered a universal basic income. So these ideas, when you're saying like, well, are we ready for it? We weren't ready for the COVID. We could have been ready for the COVID crisis, but clearly we weren't, because we were putting Donald Trump in office. So now that we got slapped in the face by COVID, so to speak, we have to be ready. It's like, are we ready for the rain when we walk out the door? Maybe we forgot our umbrella at home. We weren't ready. But when it starts pouring on our head, we better run back, get our umbrella. In other words, next time we will have it. We will have our. So what I'm saying is, I think people now are starting to understand, hey, UBI wasn't a bad idea. In fact, a lot of people started going back to Andrew Yang and interviewing him like, hey, tell us more about that idea about UBI, because everybody's losing their jobs, and what about that? And now it's become it's becoming talked about throughout the politicians, especially on the left, because we can't have an economy where everybody's out of a job and no one's got their money to pay for their rent or their food or their health. I mean, we're going to have to seriously rethink all this stuff, and we're going to have to do it in a hurry, because COVID came. And so as bad as COVID is, and it really is obviously the biggest tragedy we've seen in a long time, it has a silver lining in the sense that it's kind of making everybody start to think about things that we have to address. We can't be so naive as to think that we're going to be able to just handle anything that comes along. Clearly, this has devastated not just the United States, but the whole world. And that also, another silver lining is has shown that we have to, as a world, cooperate. If we all get together and cooperate, we can try to fight this disease. I think it was Peter Diamandis, one of the founders of the Singularity University, early on. He said, this is going to be interesting, because unlike when we had a big disease back in 1918 or over 100 years ago, one of those plagues that were devastating the world, we didn't have the technology we have today. He says now the world is going to, and pardon my expression here, but this is what he said. He says the world's going to, he said that we're gonna science the shit out of this. That's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna make this disease go away, because we're gonna work on it collectively as a world. And he's right, because if you look what happened, we're coming out with vaccines now that normally they take years to come out with, but it looks like we already have some that they're already doing early clinical trials on. So hopefully we'll have a vaccine soon. But we can't pretend like this is going to be the only virus. There's probably going to be another one coming, and then we got to be ready for that. So we are going to have to start to address things with a new perspective and look at things differently, which is what this virus has done. I mean, clearly, no one decided in the United States anyway about wearing masks. That's a new thing for us. Social distancing is something new, but look how quickly we had to adopt it. So when you were asking me like, are we ready for it? No, we're probably not. But are we adaptable? Yeah, we're adapting to it, and it's harsh at first. But if we don't, we die. So we kind of have to start to really think about these things. And I think what I hope is that it shows why leadership is so important. We take it for granted sometimes. Obama made things go from a disastrous economy, which was what he was given when he came into office. The world was almost on collapse. And he turned it around to a really positive one. And people started to think like, well, maybe it'll take care of itself. So if we put somebody like Donald Trump in, it'll be fun. Well, it's fun until somebody gets hurt. And sadly, people are dying because of incompetence. So what I'm hoping is now that people learn their lesson, and that we're going to put more competent people in, because it's not just Trump. I mean, we had a Congress that tried to, talk. They wanted to interview Mark Zuckerberg about technology, and they didn't even know how to ask him questions, because a lot of them didn't understand technology. That's what goes back to why we need to have more leaders in there that are much more science oriented, because we're living in a world that science is becoming the biggest part of our day-to-day existence. 100 years ago or more, we were an agricultural society. Most of society, 80-90% was what we were all about. Now it's barely 3% of our economy. And so we have to be all about science. Our leaders must be much more acclimated to what is going on, especially not just the current science, but the stuff that's coming up, because it's going to transform us. We're like we started at the beginning of the show. It's doubling, and it's doubling, and it's going to double sooner and sooner. So instead of just a year and a half or 2 years, it's going to be a year, and then it's going to be faster. So we have to be ahead of this curve.
Right. I think we're living in an exciting time, and you rightfully pointed out this natural disaster, COVID, could be this small block which has come for mankind to understand the wrongs in a society, and it's given us a chance to correct those wrongs. I mean, the capitalist world has created huge inequality, and here we have a chance to kind of correct those wrongs. Like you pointed out, how countries are spending billions and trillions of dollars in military, where they could actually stop creating hatred and start creating love, where you do away with the boundaries, you do away with the wars, and you make an inclusive world where you don't have boundaries. You like John Lennon said, imagine, how about building a better world?
I love that song.
Yes, it's a beautiful song. It's a small song. It's so profound. It's only the mankind wakes up, goes to the lyrics, and understand how profound and beautiful that tune is, right? So you pointed out to Andrew Yang. I guess we need leaders who have foresight and who know what the future is coming, and have the capability of understanding, dealing with those kind of things, like universal basic income. I think with 120 odd million people jobless in India and 50 million jobless in America, and I think more and more are going to be jobless, because we're still dealing with the lockdown. We don't really know what's going to happen next. Universal basic income, I think, is going to play a big role, and I guess the entire world needs to adopt now. It's about us, people, collaboration, cooperation. We have to break away our silos and come together, and I guess that's the only way we will grow as a human race. So I am super excited about that world. I'm super excited about the technologies. I also know the technology has its minus points. It has these plus points, but if it goes in the hand of the wrong person, or what, it could create something terrible. So any last words to our listeners?
Well, I agree. By the way, yep, like I said, I love that song. But the Transhumanist Party really is about not just improving our health and our lives, but it is about eventually achieving higher goals, higher levels on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we want to be able to fulfill all of those things, but also reach higher levels of compassion and love and understanding. I mean, really, our goal is to live longer, but live more cooperatively and better. So when we talk about, when you were talking about, where technologies can have its good side and its bad side, well, that's been true for every technology ever, right? It's usually, you go back to fire, you can cook food, but you can burn down a house if it's not done properly. Well, here's the thing. There's a convergence, as we can see, of new technologies that are going to not only improve our health, but as throughout our whole discussion today, we talked about the problem of the people that have the fear of things and the fear of the unknown. And that goes back to education. So, and imagine, as we talked about, Elon Musk, who's now started a company called Neuralink. And he's already started this company where he's doing brain computer interface. And it's not just him. There's other companies like Kernel and other companies out there that are doing this. Well, once we start to merge our brains with the cloud and with technology like that, what'll happen is we'll become, as individuals, we'll all become much smarter. What was the other company? Oh, Alter Ego is another one of those companies that it's got a simple technology. Now, it's not simple, I shouldn't say that, but but when I listen to the guy describe it, it's amazing, where they can put a patch on your neck and you can just basically think about it with your throat as to what you need to hear, and it'll answer in your head, instantaneously, and which would allow you to think in one language and talk in another language. So the whole communication barrier could go away. I think we have to think about the fact that if we can use brain interface to make humans much smarter, and not just the idea of brain interface where you have access to knowledge, but also brain interface where you have analysis, like if we're going to have nanobots that can get into our brain to glom onto the neurons so we can have all that information, we could also have, analysis bots so we can think thousands of times faster. Now, this is important because if we're going to get along, we have to understand and be super smart. That way we can understand that, like, oh yeah, wait, if we all fight each other and we're all attacking each other, we're all going to die. Wouldn't it be smarter if we all were, wouldn't it be better for our existence if we cooperated? So by becoming much smarter simultaneously with what's called the economy of abundance, which is coming, because automation is going to start to make things where everything's going to be much cheaper. We already have 3D printing, and pretty soon we're going to have molecular manufacturing devices that can make anything just by putting a program in there to make it. So once we have a huge amount of supply, then demand goes away. And then all of a sudden, if everybody has what they want, even the idea of greed, which is a terrible part of our emotional construct, that'll kind of become dormant. Like, what are we going to fight over? Why would a country want to fight? It's like, well, I'm going to fight because we want more of the resources. Well, what if we have molecular manufacturing devices and it makes everything we want all the time? What are you going to fight over? If there's nothing to fight over, then actually John Lennon's ideas in his songs could come true. There won't be boundaries, artificial boundaries. By the way, if you look at Kurzweil's books, you'll see where he talks about world governance at one point. Because if a lot of this stuff disappears with regard to boundaries and we all become super smart, we'll probably look at religion a little differently too. I don't want to say anything, but it's going to be looked at maybe more like Greek mythology. But my point is we're going to really all start to understand one another a lot faster, a lot better. And the reason people tend to fight is because they don't know each other personally. But with improved communication, we're all going to say like, oh yeah, okay, I get that. I see we're no different. We all love our children. We all love our neighbor. We can get along. And once we got that, the world's going to take off in big, better ways. And I think that's what, not only do I think that's going to happen, but I think it needs to happen for our survival. If we don't go that route, then we're not going to, well, we'll see. But I do see that coming. And I think that's what someone like Musk is the beginning of that kind of thing, where it's going to become very popular because we've got a guy that people kind of like. He's kind of cool and exciting. They based Iron Man hero on him. So that means that the young generation is going to start to pick up on these things, and they're really going to be the ones that are probably going to push this whole agenda of love and peace and being super smart forward. So that's probably my last word I could say for now.
Lovely. Charlie, pleasure and honor to talk to you. And I wish you the very best for your candidature for the presidential. Yes, I think, you rightfully pointed out, we're going towards the economy of abundance. And maybe greed might just get out of, because I think greed is the reason for all wars or everything which is bad in society. So yes, I think we're living in a beautiful time, and maybe the convergence of creativity. You're a musician, right? Your background is a musician. The creativity, the technologist, the science. If it comes together, I think we have a chance of creating a better world, a world where you said a future of abundance, and abundance for everyone. And I guess we should strive for something like that, and that would be the ideal world. Now those traditional companies like the banking industry, the religions or that needs to crumble for the new world to come in. So I personally am super excited for the new world, and I'm waiting for a world where, like you said, maybe we can converge and we can reach out to each other. Maybe we can share thoughts and maybe it'll be a better world, And on that note, Charlie, really, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for being on the show. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.